Hey everyone, welcome to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Sage Hobbs, author and creator of Naked Communication, and I'm so psyched you're here. This show is all about taking charge of your life in new and inspired ways to create a life you deeply love. It's about being more you in all areas of your life, more courageous, more free, more alive, more naked. I'll be sharing stories and advice from amazing people around the world who are up to incredible things on how they are successfully breaking free from fear and old patterns in order to create incredible relationships and impactful lives so that you can do the same. This is the place to be inspired to live a courageous and naked life. Let's do this. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Sage Hobbs, and this is episode 45. So before we dive into today's guest, I want to make sure that you know how to connect with me and find out more about all of the things we talk about in today's episode. You can do that over at sagebhobbs.com/episode-45. You can grab a copy of the Naked Communication book over there. You can binge listen to other episodes. You can figure out a little bit more about what it means to work with me personally. I take a few one-on-one clients at a time. And you can just poke around and see what this is all about, this experience of naked living. There's some free things and resources over there for you. Also, if you love the show, if you've been a listener, I'd really appreciate if you hop on over to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review if you want to. That's how we really help this get into the ears of more listeners. And listening is free. I love podcasting because I feel like it's an accessible way for people to activate, be inspired, make change in their lives that people can do for free if they have access to the internet, which is more and more available to people around the world. Not everywhere, but more and more available. So it makes a huge difference when you subscribe and leave a review because then iTunes helps us share it with more people. And like I said, listening is free. So that would be wonderful if you're up for that. So today's guest is Johanna Walker, and she's awesome because I always bring awesome women on to share their stories with you. Johanna is a public speaking coach. And before you run screaming, because public speaking is one of people's number one fear, we get into so much beyond stage fright. We talk about it some, but really we get into the power of our voice and how storytelling and truth telling can be a huge transformational opportunity. Johanna's been doing this work for a long time. She's done it with organizations and corporations and individuals. She really helps people develop their authentic presence as speakers and find the ideas that they really want to be known for, and then craft those ideas into compelling talks and presentations. And I will link to one of the talks she gave that I thought was excellent that we speak about in our conversation today. So I think one of my favorite pieces of today's conversation was when it really became clear to me that there's so many ways to be of service and to make an impact. And Johanna really thinks of unleashing our voice and sharing our story as a way to unravel oppression. That to me is really the soul of some of the work that she's doing. So let's do it. I introduce you to Johanna Walker. Johanna, I'm so glad you're on the show today. Thanks so much for being a part of Naked Conversations.
You're so welcome, Sage. It's great to be here.
Yay!
Yay!
Okay, so obviously this is Naked Conversations, where we talk about really living fully self-expressed lives and deeply connected lives with this sense of freedom and joy and impact, whatever that looks like for you. So that always requires courage. To live what I call a naked life really requires courage. And I like to start the show always by asking this question of folks. And it's kind of a doozy just right out the gate because I like to just dive right in. It is, what does courage mean to you?
I think courage means stepping up and stepping in and doing something scary. But doing it, I think the courage is what you have to call up inside yourself in order to do it, in order to step into it and bring your whole self into it. So I think, when we do something scary and step out of our comfort zone and walk to that edge, it forces us, or at least invites us to dig deeper, to go deeper into the well and pull something up in order to do it. And that thing that we pull up is courage. And I think the amazing thing is that once you pull it up, it's yours. Like you have more access to it and you get to keep it. And so then I think that's why it's valuable to do scary things and step out of our comfort zone. Then we get to do that dig for the courage, and then it becomes ours in a bigger way.
I love it. I love that idea, the visual that you created of like digging deeper into the well. Then you have something that's more accessible every time you need it. Do you still find, I'm going to go deeper on this one because I'm curious. Do you find though that the next level of scary thing requires the same level of excavation for the courage, or do you think it comes more naturally over time?
I think there's always a dig. It gets easier. Certain things get easier and the courage is more accessible. And then boom, something can always show up and just like knock you over and be like, whoa, okay, I got to dig a little deeper. There's still another layer. I'm going to go get more.
Right. Totally. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like I access it and then I have to re-access it sometimes.
Right.
But that you're right, with certain things, it's not always the same trigger of the fear. It's a different angle or a different level. So great. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So as we go through our conversation today, there will be opportunities. I would really love to hear about, courageous things that you have had to embark upon on your journey. But I first want people to know a little bit more about you. So you're a storyteller, or that's how I really think of you. And you really help others share their own stories powerfully and authentically. So can you tell us a bit about what you do and why you came to do it?
Yeah, I work with a lot of business owners who want to, I'd say mission-driven business owners, passionate business owners who have a business, but also want to have impact and make change in the world and want to use speaking to grow their business, but also to grow an audience and have an impact and inspire people to bigger lives. So I help those folks craft talks and tell their story and show up with confidence and make those connections from the stage. But then I also work with a wider audience of professionals just in getting more connected to their voice and their body and their comfort and their authenticity, so that when they come to the stage or when they go to the front of a boardroom or when they enter a difficult conversation, they can really show up with authenticity and ease and express themselves.
Awesome. I find that a lot of times people talk about this idea of connecting with your voice, and then not everybody really knows what we mean by that. You know what I mean? And then you added in that piece around and your body, which I know, like, if you're starting to go beyond a certain sector of impact-based entrepreneurs, people don't always know what we mean, with voice and body. So can you talk about what you mean by that a bit and how it might be relevant to folks who also aren't entrepreneurs, but want to connect with that part of themselves?
Yeah, well, I think for most people, the image, when we have a picture of our voice, it's our mouth. It's like your mouth and your throat, your vocal cords, and that's your voice. And I like to have a bigger picture where my voice starts in my pelvis and my diaphragm and my belly, and it moves through my heart, and it actually resonates through my whole body, so that when I speak, it's not just my voice, but my whole body is expressing myself. And, that's sort of the physical voice, like the voice resonates through my whole body when I speak. And so by waking up my body through movement and playfulness, then I get more connected to my voice. So that's the physical voice. But then there's also just like who you are in the world and what you say and how you speak your truth and what truths you speak. And your voice is kind of a metaphor for who you are in the world and how you show up in your relationships and how you show up in your business or in your family or in your community. So I think of the voice as just a much bigger thing than just the physical.
Got it. But there is this physical component that I think you have a slightly different approach to, that when you speak, it's not just your voice, but your whole body expresses itself. I think that's just such a wild concept. And then, of course, the metaphor of that your voice is much more about who you actually are and how you show up in the world. But this piece around speech, starting from your pelvis on out.
Yeah, well, I think
I didn't mean to get that's the not the naked I meant, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. When people get scared, when people say, oh, I'm scared of public speaking, or I get nervous when I'm on stage, for most people, there's like the story your mind is telling you. It's like, oh, they're bored. I'm not interesting. I'm not prepared enough. I suck, blah, blah, blah. There's a story your mind is telling you. That's one way that the fear shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Another way that the fear shows up is physically. Your breath gets tight, your belly clenches, your knees wobble, you shake, you sweat, you turn red. And it shows up for different people in different ways. But often there's some kind of physical response that your body has to stepping into a scary thing, to doing something vulnerable, to doing something risky. Your body, steps in. It's trying to help. It's doing its very best to help, but often it's not helping.
Oh, I know. I have felt that way.
Yeah.
I have felt that way.
So I think one of the best ways to get your body on board is actually through your voice and your breath.
Got it.
And that vibration of fear and nerves and energy, that's vibration, that's energy. And the voice is also vibration. So it's like, let's turn the vibration of fear and nerves and shaky shake into vocal power.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. That actually made more sense to me than ever before. And I've heard you talk about it before.
Uh-huh.
So I love that. Like, let's use the energy of the shaky shake into vocal power. You know what I mean? Because I often try and manage things in my mind.
Right.
And it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not alone in that.
Yeah, I think it's powerful to turn off the mind and to go to the body.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I work with that some with my own clients just to really like find your body again and know that you even have one. And how is it informing, the choices you make and the way that you are connecting with people. And let's like pay attention to this vessel, right? So that's really clear to me when you say, can we just actually take the sensation, not try and only fight it in our minds, but take the sensation and transform it and use it as like a part of this experience of your vocal power. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's, when I talk about digging for the courage, that's an actual specific, like digging for the courage is kind of a metaphor. So what you're actually doing when you're digging, one of the things you can do is breathe and scoop up the vibration of the fear and connect it to your voice. So it's an actual physical thing you can do to do that dig for the courage.
And this is something you help people figure out how to do. If they're going like, what? Yeah. What are you talking about? Like you can actually like talk them through and have them practice feeling the breath scoop up the energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. So you talked about this experience of like helping folks uncover their voices and their stories, which is really pretty profound thing to share with folks, right? So what is that like for you? How does it unfold when you're actually sitting across from someone or you're in front of a room working with a group of professionals? What is that process like of helping folks to uncover their own stories? And how does that take place?
Well, it's usually part of a process of crafting, getting clear about the goal. Mm-hmm. We always have to get clear about why are you doing this? Why do you want to tell this story? Who's listening? What's the outcome? What are you aiming for? Because I think telling your story for the individual is a powerful transformative act. For me to tell my story is a powerful healing transformative act for myself. Mm-hmm. But the reason we tell our stories is to connect to the audience so that their story is awakened in them, so that they get inspired to take an action, to see a new perspective, to try something differently. So my story is a powerful thing for me to tell, but the other end of it is who's listening, who's out there, and why is my story going to be powerful for that person? So as we start to dig into what story do you want to tell, we always do it in context of who's listening, who's out there, mm-hmm. Who are you telling your story to? What's the universal? So I have my personal truth, my personal aha, my personal epiphany, but how does that personal epiphany expand into a universal truth, a universal aha? So it's always like we're looking at the specificity of your story, your challenges, your wisdom, your little goof ups, your transformations, your big ahas that are very, very specific and very, very personal to you. But then we always want to look through that door of specificity to the wider view of universality.
Mm-hmm.
How is your story everybody's story?
Yes.
And I think with that lens, when we look through that lens, then it's like what story to tell often becomes more clear, and we just dive in. And again, it's like the more specific you can get in your story, that's the doorway to universality, to how it can connect to the person who's listening.
The more specific in your story is the doorway to universality. It feels like a little bit like an oxymoron. So help me there a little bit.
Yeah. So I think if I'm going to really take you into a specific moment in time and space, like I tell a story about, I was scared, quiet young person. I didn't speak. I went for days without speaking, but I always wrote in journals. And there was this opportunity I had to read a poem at the 20th anniversary of the Kent State shootings. I was living in Kent, Ohio. And I found myself at the microphone. Like I thought I had volunteered to read somebody else's poem for this event. But at the last minute, I learned, they said, "Oh no, we thought you were reading your own poem." So I panicked. My guts just like fell out of my belly. My knees were shaking. I wanted nothing
I can feel that.
to run. Yeah. I was like, "No, you don't understand. I don't read my own poems." But I did. I went through my folder and I grabbed a poem from my folder of very, very secret and very, very private writings. And I went to the microphone and I read my poem, and I could hear the entire audience in complete stillness. And I could hear my voice in the microphone filling the room. And I could feel my voice landing on the ears and the hearts of the audience. Like I could feel the resonance. It was palpable. It was like a physical sensation I felt in my body. It was the sensation of connection, of having a voice and being heard. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, that's my voice. I have a voice. I do have something to say. My story matters to somebody. Because afterwards, my poem was about silence, about my experience of not speaking. And so many women came to me afterwards and said, that's my story too. And so I think, which was amazing for me, I had been in just such a little bubble of quiet and silence. And to hear other women say, that's my story too, just shook me. It completely rearranged my world.
Yeah, right. I imagine it would. My gosh.
Yeah. So I think the specificity, just back to the specificity, like in describing that moment, there are many, many moments in my life where I have connected, said, oh, I have a voice, but when I tell that one specific moment in time and space and how it felt in my body and me standing at the microphone and feeling my voice in the room, like that might not be your story,
Right.
But because I go so specifically into my experience at that moment, it could invite you into another equally specific moment in your life.
Totally. And it's so much more humanizing than just saying, I was a shy kid who had a hard time expressing my ideas and opinions and thoughts. And so I didn't, hang out with everybody else as much. Like that generalization doesn't pull at one's heartstrings in the same way as the story you just told me, where I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm in it. I'm like, I've never heard that one before from you. And I'm like, oh yeah, oh man, woo, I could actually like feel the experience of that for you. I could see younger Johanna. And so therefore I could like kind of feel that human connection. And I love this idea that what you experienced was a sensation of connection and of having a voice and being heard, which for me in my work is like the heart of my work. That's just so I love when I hear other people getting at that same piece from a different angle, right? Because I actually believe everybody is craving and yearning for deep connection, and that we want it now more than we almost ever have before.
Yeah.
And that is really like the fundamental basis of our personal happiness and our success in our professional lives, is that real connection. So I love hearing you help people experience that, because I pretty much think that that's not what most people think of when they take to the stage. Like people who take to the stage and know that they love public speaking and maybe have been trained by you, which I've had a little training by you. There is that like profound joy of connection. But I think a lot of people really just are like, oh my gosh, it's a scary thing I have to do in order to get my work done in the world. I'm thinking of somebody in my family who speaks to huge audiences because it's a necessity of his job, and he's a leader in his field, right? So he kind of has to. But I don't think his experience is of connection to the audience. I think it's of like trying to powerfully disseminate information.
And I think what happens is that when it's scary, our instinct is to override the fear and just do the job.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people can successfully do that. Override the fear, override the body, and just do the job. Get the information out there and do the job. But when you actually slow down enough to feel the fear, to feel the sensation in your body, to let it move through your body and not run from it, that actually invites deeper connection. That's where you actually bring more of your vulnerability to the stage, and people feel that. Your audience feels that. Then they bring more of them so they can take a little exhale and be there with you in the room. And the connection that happens is a little bit deeper.
And you get to experience it as the speaker because you haven't removed yourself from the experience. Actually, you actually get to share in the experience.
Yeah. And it's scary because it means you got to feel the fear. You have to actually feel it rather than override it or stuff it or run from it.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, it's, woo. I mean, I guess it wasn't that recently ago, this past fall, almost a year ago, we were at the Emerging Women Live conference together. And you were so sweet to me. You gave me a little pep talk. I really needed one because I was going to take to their sister stage. And girl, I was feeling all those shaky feel. Like I was really having to manage my state. I was like in the back of the room, kind of awaiting my turn and really trying just to breathe and be with all of the sensations that were sort of like coursing through me really intensely. And I think the edge for me, and I'm sure for others, is to stay present. So I get up there as soon as I start talking. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love being with people in that way. And it actually is quite a natural dynamic state for me once I begin. But the preceding it feels so intense. And I guess it's also the more you do it, the more you can trust that the outcome will be delicious. Right.
Yeah.
But the preceding it is so intense. And I think that, my Achilles heel is still to stay present even while giving a talk and sharing, where I tend to get more a little bit into performance-y mode where I'm having fun. That is another way of taking myself out a little bit. So I just love this reminder that, and again, like I want to take it to those who aren't going to take the stage, but they're in conversation with people in their lives all the time.
Always. Yes.
Managing a team, in being part of a team, being part of a family. Like we often will sort of take ourselves out of it. Out of the experience of the discomfort, or sometimes even of the pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you take yourself out of the discomfort, you're denying yourself some of the pleasure.
Interesting.
I think ultimately it comes from the same place. And if you're willing to really feel the discomfort, even in a conversation, just to slow down enough to feel your body and feel your breath and feel whatever fear or nerves or anxiety might be resonating in your body, to feel it and then keep going from that place rather than steamrolling it. Always, I think in any situation is so powerful and easy to forget. And we're not really trained to do it. And
I just want to say it makes you a total badass because like, I mean, public speaking is like historically, right? Like people's biggest fear next to death is public speaking, right? So what is that like for you to watch other people sort of connect with their inner badass? Like what is that when you actually see somebody start to share themselves with that kind of vulnerability? What does that feel like for you?
It is amazing. It's really an amazing feeling. Like I do feel pretty comfortable speaking. I still get nervous, but I know what to do with my nerves. I know how to really, again, just show up for the sensation. So I have gotten pretty comfortable in that space where it used to be an absolutely terrifying thing for me. So I love getting to see somebody who is so precisely at their edge and so wanting. It's like right on the other side of that thing of the fear is the thing that they want, which is their full expression and their voice in the world and the people that they want to connect with, the people they want to serve. And like I can see the thing that's stopping them. And then when I see them walk up to it and meet it, it's just extraordinary. I see it both like I do this program, Women Who Speak, where I work with 6 women and I take them through the process of crafting a talk. And the program ends with them getting on stage and delivering the talk. And so there's all this hashing and gnawing and, am I doing it right? And this story, that story, how do I craft, blah, blah, blah. Who's my audience? What's my call to action? All those questions. But seeing them get to put that talk on the stage and the joy afterwards of like, oh my God, I did that. And I did it from a deep place of connection and authenticity. And I told a difficult story. Just getting to watch that process is really remarkable.
Yeah. What a beautiful thing to be able to share with people. I mean, really, my gosh, you're going to choose some work in the world. It's vulnerable stuff.
Yeah.
It's vulnerable stuff. Here's a question for you to go even a little deeper with the vulnerability piece. What's the most vulnerable story that you yourself have shared publicly? Can you tell us about that experience and really what came from that?
Yeah. About 4 years ago, I was invited to give a talk at a Spiritual Women Leaders conference, an event. And they asked me to speak about how I walk the edge. And I was at the time 50. I was just turning 50. And I was a single woman without children. And that was an edge for me, like that I was living a powerful life as a single woman, that I had, and I hadn't had children. But the tricky thing was not having children wasn't my choice. Like I wanted to have children and I didn't. So there was a lot of grief attached to it. And that, to be a woman without children who chose that is really different from being a woman without children who didn't choose it.
Right. 100%. Of course. Yeah.
And so I immediately knew that was the story I needed to tell. And up until then, it had been a very private journey and a very private story.
And grief, private grief.
And private grief. Private held certainly in my intimate circles, but not shared in a public way.
Of course. Yeah. Very different.
Yeah.
Very different.
And so, but I immediately knew I needed to tell that story. So I did. And it was terrifying. And I've told this story a lot to my clients that like that morning I was under the covers, literally trying to figure out how to get out of it.
Oh,
how can I cancel?
Gosh. Yeah.
How can I cancel? Johanna, why do you put yourself through this? You don't have to do it. You don't have to do this.
You don't have to do it. Right.
You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. And coming up with excuses for how I could get out of it. My car broke down. I'm really sick. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to be able to make it.
Really, really coming right up against all that sensation. I can see you in the bed. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But I did it. Even when I'm standing backstage, I was still considering running. I was considering running out the back door.
Yeah, I got it. I really got it. It was really the edge. It was like an abyss. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because of, that whole story of what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be female? What makes me a whole and complete female? And the cultural story around that is so heavy. And so to put myself out and say, I didn't have children. I don't have children. I'm 50 and I don't have children. And I wanted to. And I have a lot of grief around that. Was really, really an edge for me. And, when I was standing there behind the stage, I imagined one woman in the audience, not a specific woman that I knew, but I trusted that there was one woman in the audience who might need to hear my story today, who might have a similar story, and that my story could touch her and serve her and make a difference to her. And that woman, that imaginary woman, is the reason I walked out onto stage. I gave the talk and it was powerful. It was powerful for me to show up. There were a couple, I was preparing that talk really right up until the last minute. So I wasn't as rehearsed as I encourage my clients to be.
Couldn't sit with that material quite. It's different.
And so I blanked out there were two different moments in the talk where I just totally go blank.
Yeah.
Total blank.
And you survived it. So we all can.
Standing up there in absolute void, nothing. And I stayed present with that terror. I stayed in my body. I took a breath. I connected with the room. I stayed. And then I kept going. What I needed to say returned.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one little piece of vulnerability, was just the being unprepared and going totally blank. And then just sharing the content of the story and being able to share the transformation and the fire that I've walked through in that grief and what has been able to be born as a result of that. And then sharing that, there was that one woman in the audience, and there were many more than one woman in the audience. And the talk is public online and has been viewed by many, many people and has connected me to many, many people. And so many people have told me, thank you for that story. I showed your video to my family because I haven't been able to figure out how to talk about it. I haven't been able to communicate my grief to my family, but you did it so well. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that gives me chills.
Yeah.
So in the internet age, actually, there's like this real beauty of the fact that it can continue to resonate and continue to serve. Like people who need to hear that story, it's available for them.
Right.
Do you have a link to that I could put in the show notes?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Send that my way and we'll make sure people can access it, because that's a really raw edge for a lot of people. That's a real sensitive thing for those who are in that, to feel like a sense, again, it keeps going back to connection, right? The heart of my work, the heart of yours, but there's this sense of like not being alone, being seen, being heard, feeling like your experience is valid, feeling like other people have walked that path. It's enormous in terms of our like shared humanity.
Yeah.
So that's what came out of you walking to your edge. That's awesome. How did you know that you were ready to tell that one? I was just listening to somebody else's podcast. It probably was Jonathan Field's Good Life Project, because that's the only thing I've been listening to lately. And I can't remember which one. If I can, I'll put it in the show notes. But this whole idea of when to share and disclose, like on the internet, people sometimes are doing their whole messy very publicly. And some people are like, yeah, be naked, be vulnerable. And then others, myself included as a former counselor of over a decade, like maybe you want to process your own grief a little bit or your own master divorce or tragedy a bit before you really can teach on it, can lead or teach on it. I think there's an edge. Like I like to show up very much as myself and not act like my life is all perfect, but also celebrate what is working and try and work with people on things that I've at least moved through a few stages ahead, so that I'm not like in a panic attack. I mean, there was periods in my life I had massive panic attacks, and I have wanted to like help people with panic attacks when I was having them. But a few years later, I can talk about that now,
Yeah.
So how did you know it was time?
I think I just knew, because it's the thing that showed up. I have to tell that story. When the invitation came and the question was posed to me, that's the story that showed itself. So I trusted that.
Okay.
There was also like, that's the story I have to tell. And then, oh God, I have to tell that story. and that moment, it's a moment that has come up at the women's retreat circle. We call it, am I allowed to say it, a bad word?
Yes.
We call it a fuck nugget. It's like that moment when that story comes, you say, oh, fuck, I have to tell that story. So it's trusting the fuck nugget.
My gosh, I love
that vulnerable gem that reveals itself to you as this is the story I have to tell. So one thing I want to say about that is you never have to, even if a fuck nugget presents itself to you, you always still get to choose. There's no story you have to tell, of course. But there's a lot of wisdom there in that gem that reveals itself, that feels really vulnerable. And no, that's too shameful. That's too private. That's not something that I want other people to know about me. Usually that's the thing that is going to open the door to your own transformation and to really, really touching the person who needs to hear that. Like if you feel shame about it, there's probably somebody else who does too. And if you tell it, you break through that shame. And that is powerful. That is powerful.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. But then you're so right. Like if you're in the middle of it, if you're still really buried in the mess, it's probably a story to keep with your therapist and keep with your, your best friend or your partner until you're able to see the universal in it. Once you can really go through and get to the other side of it and be able to look back and, you don't have to have everything all figured out and you don't have to have everything perfect.
Right.
But when you can get enough to the other side of it, just like you said, where you have some perspective and you can look back and say, oh yeah, that happened. And now I'm in a different place. That's when it really becomes a gift to your audience. If you're still in it, then you're sort of asking your audience to be your therapist.
Right. And I've seen that happen.
I have too.
It's not comfortable.
I have too. And vulnerability is all, it's the buzzword. Everybody wants to be vulnerable. So everybody's like, I can be more vulnerable than you. Look at my tragic story. I've got a more tragic story. That vulnerability for the sake of vulnerability rather than like a real authentic sharing.
Yeah, it's different. They're different.
Yeah.
One is sort of like verbal diarrhea and like kind of vomiting on your stuff onto somebody. And one is like really like sharing lessons learned and like a heart-centered life experience.
And sharing is a gift, like that you're really pointing to the universal truth inside your story. That it's not about you. It's about the gift your story is giving to somebody else.
Sharing is a gift. I love that. Yeah, it's not about you. It's about the story. I love that. I'm going to chew on that. I just got distracted. I just got not present because I had like a fuck nugget thought. I was like, oh no, I think there's something else I have to speak on. So there might be an episode, a solo show coming on that. Cause I was like, okay, I think it's time that I actually talk about those panic attacks. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm like never really talking about that. And then I just said that to you and I'm like, oh man, Johanna, come on. That wasn't supposed to happen. Okay. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that piece with us. I'm really interested in how people see their work as impacting others, their community, even the world, if we were to go grandiose about it. Because I really feel like there's a deep meaningfulness, like we create meaningful lives when we can see the impact of our lives beyond ourselves. And, you know, the work that I do and the reason I even have this show that I continue to produce and share with the world is really about like, how can we have an impact? How can we make sure we've left the world better than we found it, to be cliche, but that it really is part of it for me. Like, where is the opportunity for us to make a contribution beyond? And I'm not saying it's bad to just be with my family. I'm making a contribution every day in my own little circle, but what does it look like beyond that? Right. So could you share with us a bit about how you feel your work ripples out and really makes a contribution?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about connection and you're helping people connect. And that's like the root of the seed of my work. The essence of it really is about connection. And I think connection is it's the thing that unravels oppression and the patriarchy and all the ways that we are dehumanized, all the forces that be out there that want to dehumanize us so that we'll buy more stuff, you know, that want to dehumanize us so that we'll keep fighting with each other. And so that the machine can get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that connection is the antidote to that. And so any little seed of connection, of human relationship where I get to be my fully human self in my imperfect body and my imperfect story, when I get to really, really be and show up fully human in all of my humanity with somebody else and invite somebody else into their humanity, I think that is what chips away at the machine that wants us not to be human. And so I think one of the ways that I'm having an impact is by helping people make authentic connection with themselves and with one another, both in their relationship with themselves, in their relationship with one person, and also to be able to do that from the stage. Then that magnifies. The impact grows. You know, I often, when I'm working with folks, I have them do a one-on-one exercise of connection and then invite them to the stage. So that's that feeling of, just like that we're having now, this one-on-one connection, you get to have that feeling on a stage with 100 people or 500 people or 1,000 people. It's still about connection. It's still about connection. And when we're really willing to connect and feel our humanity and show our humanity and invite other people into their humanity, that's what starts to break down the oppression.
Yeah. I love that. The connection there is beautiful. And it makes me think, I think it's something probably, I believe it's Brene Brown, who I feel like almost everything she says, I go, oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. Me and millions of others. But she says something like, it's really hard to hate up close. So move in. I'm not going to get it exactly right, but I always love it. You know, like it's very easy to judge and dislike and, you know, keep our distance when we don't really know people who have those feelings or values that we're judging, you know, but then you're like, oh wait, that's my neighbor. Like I didn't, okay. You know, lean in, like move in, like get to know them and see then, does it challenge the way you had perceived beliefs and stuff? So this idea that connection unravels oppression is really beautiful to me. I know many amazing women struggle with, you mentioned something that made me think of this, that so many women that I work with and serve and meet and know, and, you know, my friends, like feeling like nothing is ever really enough. and longing for more. And I'm curious, I'm always curious for myself about this dance between contentment and growth. That's kind of how I look at it for myself. And it's an edge for me in living a naked life of like freedom and joy. It's like, okay, I have a really blessed life and I want more, right? I want more impact. I want more transformation. I want more possibility, you know? You've successfully navigated building your own business for a while now. And even for those who aren't building businesses, but they're still trying to figure out their work in the world or how they're carving a path to making an impact. How has it been for you? Like, what has that experience around enoughness or the dance between contentment and growth? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, it's definitely been a dance. It's definitely been a dance especially in building and growing my business. There's been a lot of urgency and, just like looking out there at all the people who have more successful businesses than I do. At least that's the story in my head. And the constant climbing and reaching and investing and how to grow my business, get more clients, magnetize more, get more clients, make more money, make more money.
Right. I know.
Be more successful, have more visibility. And there's always this reach and this urgency that I feel in the culture, in the entrepreneurial culture. And I have bought into it.
Yeah.
And
me too.
Yeah. And it's so seductive and it's so tempting and it feels so just like, oh, if only I could have that thing that is just beyond my reach, then my life would be happy. And I think it's just a way that we're kind of programmed to not be okay with what is already awesome.
Right. What is already awesome.
And so I've just really done a deep practice in myself of slowing down, backing up, and noticing the urgency when I feel that urgency and just like pulling it back in to look around to see what amazing work I've done over the last 5 years and how it's already amazing.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is already amazing and already enough. And I have what I need. And I think it's similar to slowing down enough to feel the fear around speaking. There's a way of just like pulling back into my body, into my breath, into my experience of this moment and be present. Then I can look around and say, I'm okay. This is amazing. It's already amazing. And so just being in that dance has been...
Being in the dance
is really powerful. And I think it's connected to the way that we are with so much, like with my body and just like, and our bodies, especially as women, how we're kind of systematically taught that there's something wrong with our bodies. And we always
especially as we age. Yeah.
Especially as we age. Like we have to stop, just a little bit skinnier. I have to be just a little bit skinnier. My belly has to be just a little bit flatter. I need to, there's always this reach. We're never quite right. Yeah. And I think that's a way that we cut ourselves off from our power and our voices.
And our connection.
And our connection. And I think, the more we're willing to really be enough and let our bodies be exactly right. My body is exactly right as it is. And my story is exactly right. It's just perfect. It's good. It's a good story, and to be able to really show that, that's where that connection happens and where our humanity shows.
And thank you also just for answering that, because I really want people to hear who are listening. Like, I have all different types of women and ages and stages of life who listen. And I think that even just being on a podcast, then people put it in a category of the story of like that you have it all together. You know what I mean? Or you're successful or you figured it out. And like, no, we're all figuring this out. We're at different stages, but like grappling with enoughness, even if you've been, by my standards, a successful entrepreneur, for a lot longer than me. You've been in this game a lot longer than me. That even you or even me still struggles with this or that. And this dance between I am content and it's okay that I want to grow. You know, like can I hold both? Can I really hold both and not have either one consume me? Like not be so content that I'm complacent and not be so striving that I'm miserable.
Exactly.
Okay. So this is Naked Conversations. And to bring it full circle, I often talk about this idea of living a naked life. And I'm just curious, I like to ask, what does that mean to you? This idea of naked life?
I think it's trying to think of it's a lot of what we've talked about is just being willing to show the underside, being willing to show the underside in all areas of our life and all our relationships, our intimate relationships and our public relationships. Being able to show our underside, which creates a space for someone else to show theirs, and with that, we all get to be naked and we all get to have more of ourselves available to us. I think by not being willing to be naked, not being willing to show the underside, cutting ourselves off from parts of ourselves that are precious and beautiful and tender and vulnerable, and so that's what it is.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm always so curious as to how others hold that. It's such a beautiful way to wrap it up. Just you being you, me being me, and us therefore being able to be together more fully. It's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Johanna, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Anybody who's listening can find out more about you. Over in the show notes, I will post all of the ways for them to reach out and connect with you and learn more about your work and how they can work with you and what you're up to and offering out in the world. So I so appreciate you being here and being a part of this conversation.
Thank you so much. So great to talk to you.
Take care. Thank you so much for listening to Naked Conversations. Yay! It really means the world to me every time you show up. And if you want to know more about how to work with me personally and my coaching, you can check that out over at sagebhobbs.com. You can also get some great free resources over there about how to make powerful requests and many blog posts full of resources for living a naked life, as well as grab a copy of my book, Naked Communication: Courageously Create the Relationships You Really Want. Thanks again. See you next time.